And now, the lowdown with economist and political strategist Elson Low.
Hello, and welcome to the Lowdown. Thank you for joining us this evening, folks. Thank you for tuning in to the Lowdown, folks. You know, we always have a show planned for you that's going to be interesting, informative, fun. So, folks, share that link. You know what to do, folks. Let's give everyone a chance to be in on the Lowdown. Folks, thank you so much for joining us here. I'm your host, Elson Low. Thank you for starting your Saturday night on a high with Elson Low here for the Lowdown. We're going to be talking about quite a few topics tonight, but it's all going to be revolving around oil, folks. We're going to do a show summarizing a lot of the incidents that have happened around oil, and one of the key incidents that's come up lately that has shone a light on the way the government is running the oil industry and what that means for you in your everyday lives, folks. So share that link. We're going to help you all to get a good grasp of what's going on, why you should be concerned, why we're not seeing the benefits that people should be seeing in their everyday lives. We're going to give you some perspective on all of that, folks. We've got some stories lately we're going to go through that really help you to get a sense of it. So share that link, folks. Share that link. You know, we want to give everyone a chance to see the show. Bring everyone in. We're gonna have a fun show as we always do. We got some memes of the week here for you guys that are pretty entertaining. So we're gonna go through those, folks. Some of them were perhaps a bit predictable. Some predictable issues we've had to deal with. So we'll give you a sense of them, folks. Share that link. Let's bring everyone into the show. You know we love being here with you on the Lowdown. You know we always have fun here. So let's bring everyone in. So, folks, we're going to cover the oil industry. We're going to cover it through the lens of the Petroleum Activities Act, which was a act recently passed in Parliament. You may be aware that we debated that long into the night. The Leader of the Opposition made remarks on that. We're going to give you a sense of our concerns with that particular bill, particular act. We're also going to give you a sense of the concerns that we've got with governance in the sector as a whole. And the way that has really resulted in Guyanese not being able to benefit from a better standard of living. And that may mean cost of living relief. It may mean public servant salary increases. It may mean salary top-ups, as we've spoken about. Now, we believe that all of these things should be a focus of a government anyway. But at the same time, what we're seeing from this government is that their mismanagement of the sector is causing us not to have the type of revenues and capacities that we guys have. So, folks, share that link. Let's give everyone a chance to be here in the show, having fun with us tonight. Welcome to the Lowdown. Thank you for starting your Saturday night on a high here with Elson Low. We're going to break it down for you here, folks. We're going to give you a good understanding of it. We've got several news articles, including today's front page headline and yesterday's front page headline. We can even touch a little bit on earlier in the week some of the news that came out of there, because it's all connected, folks, as we discuss the petroleum legislation that was recently passed, as we discuss what is going on right now. There's some concern around the government granting an extension to ExxonMobil of a year based off of COVID-19 having hindered their operations, or so they say. But that has raised a couple questions for us. All right, maybe COVID-19 did indeed hinder the operations, but we would like to see evidence of that. We'd like to see a study of that and so on. So we'll give you a sense of it and the sense of the implications of this. What it really means for Guyana, and what we could be talking about here, and what we could be talking about in your everyday lives as a serious element of this. So, folks, share that link. We're gonna lean now into the memes of the week. You know, we love ourselves some memes of the week here, folks. So that's what we're going to do. Let's get the first one up. The first one up here. Now, so Deborah Harbor Bridge put out a notice. Vehicle off bridge to bridge. Now, I'm not sure what they meant at all. as pretty sure that that's not functional English right there. But of course, Guyanese had to come up with a comment on it. Like they sugared on by the bridge of the bridge. I'm not familiar with the youth lingo. I'm not super clear on what sugar down means, but I hope that it didn't occur on the bridge. It is funny that we sometimes see these public announcements where it looks as if the government hasn't, government agencies haven't checked what they've posted before they post it. I don't know if they maybe need to have some more comprehensive structures in place. But Guyanese like to make a joke out of everything. Like they sugared on by the bridge of the bridge. I think. Is he referring to a vehicle by the bridge? Or is he referring to the Demara Harbor Bridge, folks? I don't know who he's referring to here. I'm sure that the hardworking Harbor Bridge folks were not sugaring down. But what I would say is, I do think that we need to see a little bit more of these types of controls. You may recall that recently, I think someone had gotten control of one of the billboards or the electronic alerting devices and put out some information that was not supposed to be out there. So yeah, that's just to start you off with a little light humor, and we'll keep heading across. Let's jump across to the next meme of the week. All right, here someone says, "I should have just applied for a house in 1998 instead of learning how to walk." Now in Guyana. You hear some horror stories about people. Yeah, I've been waiting on a land for 26 years now. That kind of thing you hear quite regularly. And indeed, when some young people say, "Oh, it's been 10 years, I've been looking for my land," you hear some older people say, 10 years? That's not a long time. Really, really difficult situations that you see in Guyana. But given that this is something that's been posted recently, you can see that this is a problem that the government has not been able to address at all. Not at all. Let's jump across to the next slide as we continue here, folks. Here we have someone else posting, "I should have applied for a house in 2004 instead of learning how to walk." Now, clearly, these two people are of different ages. One was learning to walk in 2004, and the other in 1998. But they seem to have the same thing on their mind, folks, which is that the housing process is way too long. What is that, 19 years, 2004 to 2023? Oh, goodness me, it's way too long. Now, what we have said regarding housing in Guyana is that we're going to have a rent-to-own scheme where the government will build houses quickly, efficiently, high quality, and then rent them out to low-income Guyanese. And then you'll be able to, just by paying off your rent, pay for your house. So you can avoid having to go through these long processes. So you can avoid having to go to the bank to get a loan. And I know a lot of Guyanese are not don't have access to credit. They may owe some of these businesses that provide credit for, let's say, a washing machine or a chair or something. So there's often a problem when it comes to credit. Now, the way to deal with this efficiently is to have a housing program that is sponsored by the government, and in which you actually are going to see, progress when it comes to being able to get houses out to Guyanese. And of course, this is something that you see in Singapore because they have a very extensive housing program. We're gonna do a show where we talk extensively about Singapore, but what they've got going on, and what I think we've covered it on the show, but we need a refresher on this. They say that they've basically solved housing. One of the problems with public housing is that they say it's kind of a trade-off. It can either be abundant, affordable, or high quality. You have to pick two of the three things: either abundant, affordable, or high quality. You can have affordable and high quality housing, but it's not abundant. You can have abundant and affordable housing, but it's not high quality. Singapore has been able to solve that by the government building out housing and being very structured in the way that they do it. We will piggyback off of the Singapore model, but what we'll also be doing is a rent-own scheme where you'll be able to pay for your house just through paying your rent, folks. So that's how we intend to approach this. And it's going to be something that's really helpful and beneficial to Guyanese. in terms of helping us to solve our housing problems. Now, we on this show, we've been showing you that rental prices across Georgetown are through the roof, unbelievable prices. A lot of young people have been complaining about the access to housing. In fact, a lot of young people are complaining that they feel as if, and I think we covered this in the previous show, Guyana isn't for Guyanese. That's something that you've been hearing quite a bit, and it's really unfortunate. So there you go, folks. That's something that we want to highlight for you. We want to help you to understand is that we're going to deal with these issues instead of having people complain. I should have applied for a house in 2004 instead of learning how to walk. Oh, tragedy. And you got a couple of shares there, so it's not just this person that thinks that. But people are expressing the sentiment on Facebook. And it's funny that it's more than one person that's posted something similar within a short space of time. So that definitely indicates that people's minds are on this. All right, let's jump across to the next meme as we continue our memes this week. I told you we got a couple. So here we got the Northwest District Ferry. Took off for its maiden voyage. You may recall this is a ferry, I believe it was retrofitted. It was out of India, and millions of dollars were spent on that ferry. It was quite controversial at the time because there was a question as to whether or not we could have gotten a higher quality ferry for the price. But anyway, nonetheless, the ferry has arrived and begun use. But in the very first voyage, Northwest Ferry encounters difficulties in maiden voyage, and the difficulties are related to the engine of the ferry. Now the government is saying it wasn't engine failure, but given that there were a lot of concerns about value for money, about the condition of the ferry that was being retrofitted or refurbished to be provided to the government of Guyana, ferry out of India, there were a lot of concerns around this ferry. So I'd ask you this. As a Guyanese, are you at all surprised that this ferry has got problems? Are you at all surprised? I don't think there's a single person in Guyana that's surprised that this ferry has given us problems. Nobody. So there's a first voyage, there's a problem. Now you may say, oh, Elson, you're being too harsh. Really, it could be that it was just a random occurrence. But here's what happened, folks, and you can have your own position on this. I personally think that this is clearly on the part of the government again. But folks, the problem is that there's some silt that got into the engine or got into the mechanical works of the ferry as it got off on its maiden voyage. Now, folks, that makes it seem like the government didn't know that the waters in Guyana are full of silt. Now, the only people who don't know that waters in Guyana are full of silt is people who are not Guyanese. Because the water is brown. So you need to tell me that you spent millions and millions of dollars on a ferry and you didn't check to see whether this ferry is compatible with the waters in Guyana. I mean, what are we doing here, folks? What are we doing here? I mean, that's unbelievable. Your first voyage is not, some unexpected storm or something. It's you just sailed out from port and the silty water affected the engines and the mechanical works. I mean, you didn't know that there was silty water was going to be in all the time. This is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Oh my goodness. But classic. Isn't it just classic? The most basic thing, like checking to see whether this is a compatible ferry with the waters that you have in your country. The most basic thing they don't do. I mean, goodness me. Goodness me, folks. And so now they're saying, they're going to work on adjusting and making sure that the ferry is all together and so on and so forth. But I mean, goodness me, The other thing I would ask is, this is the maiden voyage. It was carrying passengers. Passengers complained about the length of the journey because it ended up taking, I think, 18 hours when it should have taken hours or something to that effect. If I'm wrong, please let me know. But you would think that the government would have been conducting some extensive tests, make sure everything is all right with the ferry before actually carrying people on the ferry. But no, maiden voyage, and you've got a problem with silt. Goodness, folks, goodness. Now, it's okay if the problems that the government encounters are problems that are unpredictable. It's okay if you encounter problems where it's something that you really couldn't control. But we shouldn't be encountering problems for things that we can control that are pretty straightforward. Now, why is it the government in procuring a ferry didn't, whether it's consulting with the appropriate experts, whether it's having the appropriate government agency do this, which is familiar with these types of ships, which is familiar with the navigation and conditions in Guyana. Why is it that we didn't have that, being what's going on? My suspicion is that because this is a vessel that is seafaring, I believe it sailed all the way here from India. That this is a vessel that is appropriate for blue water. They call there's a difference between brown water navies and blue water navies. So a brown water navy is a navy that is supposed to be used in rivers and close to shore. A blue water navy is one that travels out into the ocean and so on. My suspicion is that this vessel is appropriate for blue water activities. That is to say, seafaring activities. And so the Northwest travel, obviously you'll be heading out into the Atlantic and so on. But because it now has to travel into the riverine areas which are heavily silted, you've got that problem. So you needed to have a vessel that was capable of dealing both with the blue water element that's going out into the Atlantic and with the brown water element, that is to say, coming into the rivers. But folks, I am not a naval expert by any means. This is just my reading of the situation. However, the government could have gotten an expert and could have gotten the appropriate things done. That's what really should have been done, not this kind of half-hearted or half-baked effort where the very first time you take the ship out, there's a problem. I mean, goodness me. And now, as I said, there are problems that could be excused because you can't control them. But this is like such a basic problem. Wrong type of ship, or a ship that now has to be adjusted to fit the conditions. You think it is, what's going on here? Now, that unfortunately, to my mind, and this is a theme you're going to see going forward, is a function of having a government that wants to micromanage everything and thinks they know everything, rather than setting up efficient government agencies and institutions and so on to ensure that you are able to deal with governance well. Now, we talk about the way Guyana gets money, it doesn't get value for money. This is a classic where you don't have appropriate levels of government work being done to ensure that you have value for money. So now we got to go and spend money retrofitting the vessel or adjusting the vessel or having special personnel that will clean out the engines or something to deal with the silting problem. This is a classic example. So, that's the way the government is looking to run this country. It's quite frankly tragic. And it is a theme that you're going to see as we continue on in tonight's show. Let's jump across to the next meme of the week as we keep on going. To the next slide. All right, folks. So now we're looking here at a picture of the Sabo block, Kaisho block, and Kaji block. And these are all of the blocks that are under Exxon, where Exxon is the operator on the blocks. We're going to now talk about an interesting thing which has come up, which is that Exxon has reached a stage where in October of this year, it is supposed to relinquish 20% established. Now, the green spots you're seeing there are oil finds, and there's so many oil finds. But essentially, they're due to relinquish 20% of this of the Stabroek oil block. So 20% is quite a big one, quite a big chunk of it. You may also notice on the graph that where the Kajira block is, you see that there's a blue area, right in the middle there. Right in the middle of that yellow block, there's a blue water area, right? That there represents acreage that they have had to relinquish in the past. So they've already had to give that acreage up. Now, what relinquishment really is that there's a provision in the contract and in the laws of Guyana that you have to give up a certain share of the block, that if you've not been able to prospect it or find any share within a certain period. The purpose of relinquishing is to ensure that oil companies do not hoard acreage offshore, that is to say, hold on to it so that others cannot access it, while they themselves do not have the capacity to go and explore these areas. And so, of course, that is something that you as a government would be very concerned about because you want as much as possible these areas to be explored and for us to produce oil from these areas. You don't want oil companies hoarding it, keeping it to themselves, rather than having it be explored. Now, of course, it's in their interest to keep it hoarded because they can get to it when they get to it. And they will eventually be able, at least in their heads, to benefit from being able to hold on to this extra bit of oil block. From our perspective, if we are able to get it back due to relinquishment, we can now go and auction it. And once we auction it, we can get a signing bonus, we can get a new deal, we can get a lot of those types of benefits. So the Kandri oil block acreage, that blue area that is given up, is going to be part of the oil block auction that is scheduled to be carried out later on this year. That is continuing to be pushed back and back and back, which is again a classic case of government incompetence. So that essentially is the issue of contention, which is whether in October Exxon will be required to relinquish this area. Once it relinquishes it, one would think that it will immediately become, or should in the near future become, part of the oil block area that is going to be auctioned. Now, because the staff has been so, that particular area is going to be very valuable and hotly pursued by any oil company. And Guyana would likely be able to benefit, whether it's a better contract, would be able to benefit substantially. Now, just to give you perspective, $100 million signing bonus, a large signing bonus based off of such a good perspective, something like $100,000 per Guyanese household. So not a small amount of money, and that's separate from us being able to get an improved contract out of this particular oil block space. So it's very interesting. What some of you our viewers may not know is that the Kanji oil block also is the entire Kanji oil block was actually an area that was relinquished by Exxon. So they had to relinquish that entire oil block, which then was taken up by a company. And after that, Exxon was prospecting. They couldn't prospect the whole entire area in time, so they had to relinquish a part of it. So the Kanji oil block was itself relinquished initially. Then Exxon went back in and did some work along with the company that took over the oil block. Then Exxon again had to relinquish a part of the oil block. So, clearly, you can see two things. Sometimes oil companies just aren't able to get to doing all of the digging that they like to dig, the drilling in these areas. And secondly, that just because an oil company relinquishes part of an oil doesn't mean that there isn't anything good or useful in the oil block. Because Exxon has demonstrated they've relinquished areas before and gone right back into those areas immediately afterward. Right? So, all right, now we've established that. Now, what is the bone of contention? And let's jump across to the first slide here, folks. What's the next slide? Not the first slide. Let's jump across to the next slide. My bad. So this is yesterday's paper, Friday edition. Opposition demands justification from government for extending a portion of ExxonMobil's Stabroek block. So what the government has been saying is they are going to allow Exxon an additional year to hold on to this 20% of the oil block. An additional year, and that's as a result of COVID-19 and so on and so forth. Now, folks, we've said, and this is coming from the opposition, but we'll get into a lot of detail because there's a lot of detail to discuss here. We have said that, all right, you said that COVID-19 is a problem and so on, it has caused a delay. Show us the documentation to say that the oil company has actually had a problem. Did you do a study? Did you consult with some experts? Show us the documentation. Help us to see that you actually did some due diligence. And it's not that you just felt like giving them an extension. Or, we don't know whether or not a bribe was passed. We don't know that. But that is something that I think some people would be anxious about. But one or another, you need to show us. What exactly went on here. That you actually took the time to do due diligence on this. Now, of course, what is the government responded to us saying that you need to show us this documentation? What they've responded by saying is, they're not wasting any time on that. They don't want to talk about that. One of the other reasons that is concerning in itself, right? We asked for documentation. They said, oh, they don't have time with that. Now, I mean, we waited to see if they have documentation, but I'd be pretty surprised. So let's wait and see. The other thing about it that is interesting, though, and the reason that we particularly want to see evidence that there's been a delay, and folks, the more I talk about this, the more hilarious and interesting this is going to get. Is that you may recall on this show, viewers, if you've been paying attention, it'll come to your memory. Us say, or me saying here that Exxon has been producing beyond its expectations for the past couple of years. It's been getting more oil out of the FPSOs than even the FPSOs were originally expected to produce. So it's been beating its estimates, and that has actually been causing Guyana's GDP to beat its estimates. We've been growing faster than we had even anticipated that it would grow as a result of Exxon being able to overperform. So here's my question. If you are able to overperform, to beat your estimates, how is it that you are now claiming that because of COVID-19, you were unable to carry out your operations? So if you're unable to carry out your operations, how can you be beating your estimates as to what you would produce? Does that make any sense? You would think that COVID-19 would have caused them to be underperforming, right? Based off of what they expected. So something doesn't add up here, and we want to see the documentation, because as an example, we need to get a sense of how many manpower hours were lost because people were not able to work because of COVID-19 restrictions, because workers were ill, because maybe some supply chain problems were there, But the thing about it is, and listen, we have to gather some more information. That's why we're asking for information. But there's some pretty significant questions here, and there's a real concern about the way that the government is running things, because even if you don't believe that they've taken a bribe in this particular instance, I mean, we don't have any evidence to that effect. But let's say that you don't believe they've taken a bribe, folks. You mean to tell me that the government, when it comes to something as significant as 20% of the Stabro block, isn't going to do a proper study, gather information, consult experts, and produce something that explains to the Guyanese people why they should act? They just, it's COVID-19, no problem. I mean, this is unbelievable. And I'm going to give you some perspective as we talk, as to the scale of the issue, the amount of involved with the government is just like, no big deal. And the potential losses to Guyana as a result of that. Because we're talking about some very, very serious amounts here. That what we have said is, and we'll jump to that in a second, is that, I mean, this could be billions of dollars that are involved here. But, the position of the government is no-brainer, Why would we check? We keep asking them for studies. We keep asking them to have consulted with experts. We consult with the expert. Why would we check? No-brainer. This is another example of the type of foolishness that we're seeing out of the government, which is extremely concerning. Now, so the oil company says, COVID-19 inhibited us. We need an extra year. Government says, all right, we're going to give you this year. We're not going to check or do any studies or do anything to that effect. Now, you may recall that even in the most strict elements of lockdown, that was only a short period, right? What was that? At the most 3 months across the world, the extreme, the proper lockdowns, people weren't allowed on the road, not a whole year. So why do they need an entire year? That's the first thing. But the second thing is, and let's jump across to the next slide here as we dig into this. Let's jump across to the next slide here as we look at this. All right. So the next slide here. I use excuse to grant ExxonMobil extension on Stabro receiving. And it says that the Ministry of Health, Public Works, etc., had granted exemptions to Exxon to allow them to operate despite the COVID-19 restriction. So they're saying that COVID-19 stopped them from being able to carry out their operations. But they were granted exemptions to allow them to continue their operations. So what exactly is going on here? Now, let's jump across to the next slide so you can get a little bit more detail on this. Okay, EPA, Ministry of Health, Public Works, granted the company permission to work through COVID-19. So where exactly is Jagger getting his evidence that there is a need for an extension of a year? Now, of course, we're not saying that he's lying. We're saying that we're looking for the evidence. There was a famous slogan back then: "Show me the evidence." Folks, we need to see what exactly he's relying on, what study. Now, the other thing is, there may be manpower hours that were lost, hours of work that were lost. Sorry. All right, but let's see some documentation of that. Let's see specifically what exactly is going on, and let's see specifically why it needs to be a year extension, not 3 months, not a month, not 6 months, maybe not 2 years. But you need to have a specific reason. What do you ask the government specifics? What do they say? Oh, we're not bothered with that. It's just a Wild West approach by the government. At least that is what they are saying when they say, oh, we're not even going to bother with that. We're not going to give you documentation. Is that that's the thing that people are left to, the only information people are left with is a question as to whether there even is any documentation. Question that people are left with. So that is, on the face of it, very concerning. But folks, as we continue to dig and dig, I'm just going to give you, let me see if I can quote from a few remarks that were made by Hess, which is one of the owners of the block, those who have an interest in the block. All right, so the extension of Exxon. This is from a guy. The extension of whose hold on the concession was also raised by Hess corporate legislative officer John Hess participated in. The CEO said, during COVID, we really had a force majeure period because Exxon couldn't even get workers in the country. We couldn't run 3 rigs for exploration, so we took that exploration drilling pause. Over the next 12 to 14 months, Hess will be lengthening their search for oil in the northwest section of the block. The attention as well as the discoveries have been concentrated in the southeast portion. Hess also noted that the partners plan to drill 10 to 12 exploration appraisal wells. The CEO said, "We don't want to leave any well behind. It's not in the interest of the government, and it's not in the interest of our shareholders or the joint venture." Now, they also say, "We pretty much already have identified the 20% acreage that we would relinquish, and it's nothing material and nothing prospective. So we're ready for that." Now, as we have demonstrated to you, to start with the last part first, they have previously relinquished areas and then gone straight back in. So when these oil companies say, this 20% not really important, the historical evidence is to the contrary. That's the first thing. The second thing is, though, folks, and if you're listening closely, let's pick this up. They said, we weren't able to get workers into the country, so we had to pause our operations. Now, let me go into this article today, where some former ministers, Minister Patterson and head of the EPA, are speaking about this. And here's what the minister had to say. Patterson noted, as Minister of Public Infrastructure at the time, Exxon was allowed special flights. And I have copies of them right in front of me. And there were special flights for crew changes, essential offshore activities, and there are special round trip to Port Spain as an example. So what happened during that period of time? All their personnel was allowed to come in by charter, even though the airports were closed. The charter flights were approved weekly by the Guyana Civil Aviation Authority, an agency under the Public Works Ministry. He added that the Ministry of Public Health was even providing a special service to allow Exxon to continue their operations through this period. 2 floors of the Marriott Hotel in Kingston, Georgetown, were rented to provide a quarantine facility for the staff of the company, in addition to other locations in the company. Patterson therefore argued that ExxonMobil's operations were not impacted during the pandemic. He was keen to know that in keeping with the gazetted order, ExxonMobil's contractors and suppliers were also granted a waiver to continue their activities as well. Folks, so here we have it. The operator is saying, to get our personnel into the country, the minister at the time is saying we made special exemption, first of all, to allow you to bring your staff in, to give you everything you needed. But second of all, we know that you took flights, chartered flights in, and you had personnel. And then you rented out 2 floors in the Marriott to serve for your quarantine needs during the period. So the floors were unoccupied, the flights were unoccupied, nobody came in or out. What is going on? Now, the interesting thing about this as well, folks, is I recall even taxi drivers and so on complaining, oh, the Marriott has been booked out by Exxon, we can't get any proper business and so on. So clearly, the Marriott was in use by Exxon. Folks, this is pretty concerning. We need to see documentation. We need to see a study. We need to know that the government has worked along with experts, sought expert advice. We need to see that the government has relied on best practice of other countries, because exemptions were made. So these facilities were made use of. Flights were chartered, and the oil company said it didn't get to bring in its workers, and we can show that that may not have been the case. Now, there may be other issues. As I mentioned to you, there were supply chain bottlenecks. I can understand if maybe the supply of pipes and so on was because of the ship problems, because of the problems with raw materials during the COVID-19 pandemic. I can understand all of those things, but again, it is not for me, Elson, low to understand. Rather, it is for us to have documentation and a proper study. That is how it's supposed to be run. It's not Elson will get up in the morning and say, well, Exxon, oh no man, no problem. Is that we're supposed to govern the country in a way that demonstrates this. Let's jump across to the next slide as we go here. All right, so this is my remarks on this. It's just that this can't be the way that the country is run. It can't just be that it's just on the top of somebody's head. We need to see an evaluation of this. We need to see a proper evaluation of this, because ultimately this is really. I mean, I think what is a no-brainer is that you're supposed to govern in a reasonable and thoughtful way, not just not govern. But anyway, folks, now let's look at the implications of this. Let's look at the implications of this. Now, when we consider this acreage that is going to be given up, that is acreage that presumably will have some areas that an oil company might want to drill. And we saw that it was indicated that within a year period, maybe 2-year period, the operators want to drill another 10 to 12 wells. It seems as if those wells are in this area that has not been drilled. Let's say that half of those wells, just to be generous, let's say that's something like 5 wells, is going to be in the area that will be relinquished, right? About half. Now, the average, it varies as time goes on, but the average per well find that Exxon has had, something like 300 million barrels per well, something like that. It varies, of course. Now, you may say, all right, let's say one of these wells misses of the 6, so you have 5 where they find oil. That right there is already 1.5 billion barrels of oil. 1.5 billion barrels of oil you're talking about there. Now, folks, to give you a sense of this, in the whole history of Trinidad, they've only produced 3 billion barrels of oil. The whole history of Trinidad, 3 billion barrels of oil. So this 20% could be as much as half of Trinidad. And you're talking about 100 years of oil production in Trinidad, in excess of 100 years of it. So it's not some small amount of oil. That one could be more oil than endless countries that produce oil even have reserves of countries. If you're talking about a block which by itself could have as much oil or half as much oil as the whole of Trinidad has produced in 100 years, you have an idea how much oil you're talking about. And And that is coupled now with this government approach that we don't need to do a study, we need to check. You know, that itself, that 120% by itself could be enough to make every Guyanese live comfortably. But we don't need to check, we don't need to do a study, we don't need to assess any of these things. Can you imagine? It's not we talking about the $5 or a small amount of money, even though every amount of money we should be governing properly. It's these massive amounts. 1.5 billion barrels of oil could potentially be what we're talking about here. I mean, there's another way. That's something like 50 years of oil production from Trinidad. 50 years of oil production from Trinidad. And your response is, I don't want to waste time. I don't want to bother with this. I really want to talk about it. We didn't, is there a study? Maybe not. That's your response. You talk about 50 years of Trinidad oil production. Folks, we don't even have as many people as Trinidad. You understand the amount of oil you're talking about here per person? What it could do for people's lives? 50 years of Trinidad oil production you're talking about. And this is the attitude the government has? Unbelievable, folks. Unbelievable. But, and if the operator could just go right back to the slide of that ferry, you may recall us talking about a ferry a couple minutes ago. All right, remember this ferry, folks? The ferry comes, the ferry right away has a problem with silt. There's a question whether the government did a proper evaluation to determine that this is the right ferry, the ferry will be ready for these waters. Folks, it is not one-offs. It is right through the government. They just don't understand how to govern. No clue. Or you could argue that they're embroiled in corruption right through. Now, we're not saying that there's bribes being taken there, but we're saying that these are the types of things that need investigations. This is crazy. From a ferry not being appropriate for the waters, right up to blocks of oil that might have 1.5 billion barrels of oil in it. You're seeing the same approach of government governance. Check, assess, hire people. Why would we do that? Folks, this is in sharp contrast to the way that we will run this country. Sharp contrast. We believe that you have to hire the appropriate people. We believe that you need to bring in the expertise. We believe that you need to have more robust governance. And the idea that you can just casually, who cares? That is not acceptable to us in the slightest. If these people don't understand that this is the big leagues and the amount of money you're dealing with, you can't take this approach. They think that everything you're touching is like this ferry. Oh, there's a few million here and there. Oh, it's no big deal. They think everything is like that. It's ridiculous. When it comes to a ferry like this, you're supposed to have good governance. But heading all the way up to the top, you're supposed to have good governance. Now, one thing for to help provide that good governance is a petroleum commission. And from here, we're going to segue towards the petroleum bill. We are saying that you need a petroleum commission filled with and appropriate expertise to be able to produce these studies, to be able to consistently evaluate the oil and gas industry. And let's go back to the picture of the Stavro block there, that map of the Stavro block. We need to have a petroleum commission which is adequately staffed. If you think about the staffing of Saudi Aramco, huge amounts of staff. They take these industries very seriously. They track every single barrel of oil. That is the way that this is supposed to be run. It is not supposed to be feel like it today, don't feel like it tomorrow. This is unbelievable. Folks, it is utterly unbelievable. We need a petroleum commission. And what we've said is that petroleum commission act needs to be put in place. We had raised it, PPP has dropped it, not had any focus on a petroleum commission act, not committed to when we're going to have a petroleum commission, not committed to the type of to including in the legislation strong provisions for a petroleum commission. they would prefer that things rest with the minister. Well, why would you prefer that things rest with the minister? That sounds like you want to bribe the minister. That is the type of approach you take if you feel like, let's go get ourselves some bribes. Goodness me, folks, goodness me. This is the approach the PP is taking. Let's just try and see if we can get ourselves some bribes here. Let's see. Now, folks, it's not $2 you're talking about here when it comes to these issues. We are talking just this one issue, but there's a wide range of issues about 50 years of Trinidad oil production. 50 years. Folks, you may have been to Trinidad. You may have seen the development that Trinidad has gone through. You may have seen the people in Trinidad, they have cars, high wages, and so on. We're talking about 50 years of that. So our Petroleum Commission is one of the things that we talked about. What we've also said, though, because we're talking studies not being done, is that the law should mandate these types of studies. Is that the law should say X, Y, and Z study, if it is in the contract, should be done. And it's crazy, because we even have to have a discussion around whether or not these studies should be done. Who in their right mind doesn't do studies when these kinds of numbers are involved? This billion, that billion, US, barrels of oil. Who wouldn't do a study? What? I mean, unbelievable. You know, crazy stuff you're seeing out here, folks. So we've said you need to have these studies. But again, this approach extends across governments in Guyana. Extends across. We look now at the audits. First of all, they hid the audit that we commissioned when we brought in international firm. Hid the audit from Guyanese for years. When the audit is leaked, you see that hundreds of millions of dollars could have been recovered or potentially could have been recovered. Folks, that is hundreds of thousands of dollars per household. We're talking about $200 million per household that you could have gotten in your hands. We know that we've had a difficult cost of living in this country. A struggle with cost of living in this country. And you mean to tell me they have got hundreds of millions of dollars that they could potentially recover, and they're dragging the feet on it. They don't care. There's even a $5 billion that they put in the national budget towards cost of living, which, folks, not much, not even 1% of this budget you've said is not enough. But August time, end of July, these guys didn't even spend this $5 billion. They don't care to the extent that even the money they put aside themselves, they don't use. That's how much they don't care. You're out there punishing with the high cost of living, and these guys are enjoying themselves, eating around, enjoying themselves, having a good time. No, I'm not saying that I don't have a good time, hang out or so on, live a good lifestyle, all right. But I'm out here urging the government to deal with the cost to help people. But these guys are, folks, can you imagine? Let me break this down for you. They decide cost living and did not even spend the money. That's how much they don't care. They didn't even spend the money. I mean, you mean that 7 months pass and you use them with this money there, people suffering, and you didn't even try to help. I mean, when I tell you, it fills us with disgust. So, folks, when it comes to auditing, but the thing about auditing is there's also need to build capacity to train people, and this is one of the other things that was mentioned earlier in the week, which is that they said, we will produce thousands of qualified people and so on. Where are these thousands of qualified auditors and management people for the sector? We're hearing that there aren't satisfactory auditors and so on and so forth for the sector. But that's a consequence of the government having years to prepare people and not preparing those people, not treating these issues with urgency. You may recall us having to force them to audit. You may recall that. We had to create a whole big hullabaloo to get them to audit. I had to say it should be a criminal offense not to audit. And then, after they were hiding the audits, I had to say it should be a criminal offense to hide the audits. Now the audit is leaked. Hundreds of millions of dollars been hidden. US. Hundreds of thousands of dollars that you could have had in your pocket, each and every family in Guyana. these guys are hiding this stuff. I mean, unbelievable, unbelievable. But we're seeing it right across the board. So that's just two areas in the petroleum legislation. But one of the things that we stressed across the legislation is that it can't be at the minister's discretion all the time that things are done and not done. It has to be we have better systems of governance in place. We want better systems of governance in place, not just because we want to stop, go from PFIN and X, Y, and Z, but because we want to ensure that the money, first of all, is used well, second of all, that we save, and third of all, that we give those to the average Guyanese. It's not just government for the sake of government so we feel nice at the end of the day, while of course it is important for us to run the country properly. But that we want to provide tangible benefits to the average Guyanese. We want to ensure people are able to benefit from this. There is no reason for Guyanese to be out here suffering, punishing, struggling, 43% poverty according to UNICEF. Why is this so? There's no need for that. But if that's the way you like to run the country, then there's every need for that. You're perfectly to see that. Perfectly happy to see that. One of the issues as well that has been brought up is that we believe that they need to specify or spell out in the law what items are recoverable and what items. Now, let's talk about one of these issues to give you a clear perspective. The royalty, which is one of the funding back out of the contract. Now, what we saw with the PSA for the Stabber block that existed for the Stabber block for 1990 is that the royalty was recoverable. And what that means is that basically they pay us the royalty and they'll take back out the royalty as a cost. What we did is we updated the PSA to, first of all, increase the royalty, and second of all, to make it not recoverable. That's what we did. Now, in doing that, we ensured that the oil company can't give us the money and then take back the money with the other hand. So they're giving you the money here and then they take back the money from cost oil. So you're not actually really benefiting much from this royalty. We said we're not going to do that. We're going to adjust this contract. We're going to adjust the contract that PPP put in place to ensure that we're able to get the benefits that we expect to get out of the contract. All right. Now, in a section around revenues and so on in this new law, they mention X is not recoverable, Y is not recoverable. But when it comes to royalty, they don't mention that royalty is not recoverable. That royalty should not be recoverable. So they've gone back that they used to do, that we had to change in pre 2015. It's as if they haven't learned anything, and that is, I think, one of the key lessons coming out of the petroleum legislation is that they just learn anything. They're just doing the same they're doing all along, the same nonsense that they were doing all along. You mean to tell me we had to go and change this thing in the contract, and when the time comes around again, they are out here with legislation that allows the same food, rather than adjusting the legislation to say that it shouldn't be recoverable. Goodness, it's so clear that these are the types of things that should be in there. But what we need to have is a proper list in the legislation of all the things that should not be recoverable, because there's a wide range of things where a company might try to recover an expense that might not be appropriate for them to recover. All right, that's one element. Now, what's another element of it? We've talked about spending from cost oil, where they directly will be paying for infrastructure, national infrastructure from cost oil, that belongs to the government of Guyana, and which bypasses the parliamentary process and bypasses the constitution, because you're spending before this money even gets the fund, even gets the resources fund, even gets approved by parliament. So you're spending before money gets approved by parliament, and we've said this is not acceptable. This is not acceptable and should be against the law to do this. That is what we've said about this. Now, they haven't listened. They have rejected all of our amendments because they're not interested in good governance. They're not interested in ensuring accountability. They're not interested in this type of transparency. They want to do what they want to do, and they don't want anybody to tell them anything about it. And so that is the situation that we found ourselves in. It is truly tragic. It distresses so many Guyanese, myself obviously included. It distresses us not because we just don't like the PPP. but because there's a real impact on people's lives here. People, average Guyanese, poor Guyanese, Guyanese class who are trying to move forward, all are negatively affected by a government that doesn't govern well. Now, even Guyanese who maybe have businesses, who maybe have a higher income, they are not able to benefit from these revenues that could be put towards helping them expand their businesses and create jobs. There are real people who are hurt by massive incompetence. Real people. And it's just sad to see that this government is insistent on incompetence, even when it doesn't even call for a lot from you. How much effort does it call for you to hire some people to do some studies? How much effort does it call for you to go and get some expert for a lot of you? Does it call for that? You have revenues available, you can save money from it. But if you're not interested in that, then this is the type of conundrums you'll find yourself in. And so what we're saying is, we need to see documentation for these decisions. We need to see that you've actually done due diligence. And we need to see reports coming out of these companies that X, Y, and Z was a problem and this went on. Because the way that you're governing, we don't believe that you've done any of this due diligence. Or to say, oh, we don't have time to talk about that, which makes it seem like they just don't have any foundation, any expert advice, and they're just talking off the top of their head. So let's see whether any documentation will come out of it. Let's see whether any explanations will come out of it. But sad to say, it doesn't look like governance in Guyana will get any better. As a result of that, we're going to be struggling with this cost of living crisis for some time to come. Folks, that's all we've got for you tonight on the Lowdown. We've had an interesting one tonight. Talked all up and down about the oil industry and what's been going on. Keep an eye on this. I'm sure that we're going to see a lot more on this. Thank you for tuning in and have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you for watching our program. See you right back here, same place, same time. And remember, hold the line of battle, comrades. Our victory is sure.